No, no. Say it with me. No.
No.
How do you feel when you say that? Do you feel confident? Do you feel empowered? Or do you feel like, "Ugh, I'm letting somebody or something down? I don't know if I should say that or not. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say no. Maybe I should say maybe. Maybe I should say yes, but knowing that I can't do it. And then when the time comes, I just won't show up. And then I'll make an excuse as to why I didn't show up. Therefore, I don't have to say no. If any of these things are going through your mind, you're not alone. One of the most difficult things to do, and especially for women, is to say no. And in saying no, you're empowering yourself, you're putting yourself first. And in a world that tells us that we have to be available for everyone, that could sometimes be difficult. Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa Palmer, a holistic cardiology nurse practitioner. I've been the interim or guest host of this platform for about 6 months. And I'm also author of the book, Heal Your Heart from Within. And today on the Motivational Moments, we're going to be talking about setting boundaries, saying no. How do we say no?
Mm.
We say no. And with that, I will have my colleague introduce herself, and we could get started with the conversation.
Greetings. Thank you so much, Teresa. And I am Dr. Jacqueline Brown, your sovereign leadership architect. And I love this conversation today, so we'll just jump right into it. When we talk about no, and we're talking about boundaries and saying no, I don't think we're simply talking about communication preferences. I believe what we are really talking about is sovereign self governance, and which is definitely part of sovereign leadership architecture. We're really talking about the internal architecture on the inside that's required of us to know what has access to us and what doesn't. What has access to, let's say, our time? What has access to our energy? What has access to our spirit? What has access to our heart, as Teresa so often points out. These are questions that we have to ask ourselves because when we are setting boundaries, we are actually giving people, this is what I'm going to allow to be in. This is what, in some cases, I'll give an example. This is what I consider to be my responsibility in a particular effort. And this is what is not part of that. And you're really establishing the no and the boundaries in the beginning. And that's just one example of a situation like that. And so I think it's really important that we first go into boundaries that start with us governing ourselves on the inside. Because if there's no self governance for ourselves, there won't be boundaries for anyone else. And Teresa, I'll pass it back to you. That's just my little introduction
Yeah,
for us.
yeah, thank you for that. Everything starts on the inside. And I think we've been so conditioned to be in our head and to listen to everything externally that we lose control over ourselves. And I think that that's something that we really have to take to heart because you're losing control over yourself, but you don't realize it because you're doing everything else that everybody asks you and you feel obligated.
Mhm.
Okay, there's certain things that are obligations. If there's an emergency and you want to do something, but somebody's stuck in the middle of the road because their car broke down, you're not going to say, no, I don't want to do that. You're going to change what you're doing because that becomes the priority. but with routine things, I think we just have a tendency to say yes because
Mhm,
we don't wanna say no. We feel like, "Oh, if we say no, that we're doing some" I hate to use the word harm, that's not the right word, but
mhm,
that we're really disappointing other people. And especially as women, we've been conditioned not to disappoint. We've been told that success means that we just adapt, that we do whatever is necessary, whether we like it or not, and that we keep quiet,
mhm.
that we hide ourselves. And part of saying no is saying who you are authentically. And
Yes.
that's where we have the little difficulty with, again, because we're used to being in our head, not in our heart. And
Right.
it's our heart that is where our true authentic self lies.
Mhm,
It's who we really are authentically. The heart doesn't lie, the heart knows the truth. The
mhm,
brain will lie because the brain is your ego, and your ego will adapt to whatever you want it to. But when you're dealing with your heart, it's really those emotions, what are called the heartfelt emotions, that if it doesn't feel good in your heart, it's not right. It's not right. And I think we fail to listen to that, that we may be asked to do something that we really have no interest in.
mhm,
Perhaps it's going on somebody's podcast or attending a summit or being asked to speak someplace, and you really don't want to do it. You're really not interested in it. How many have the guts to really say, "Thank you for asking me, but I'm either not available or I'm not free to do it at this time, uh, or even I choose not to do it at this time because X, Y, and Z." When we really are in our heart and we really are knowing who we are, then we don't have trouble saying that. The other thing is no, but then offer another solution. No, I can't play pickleball today, just using an example, but I could certainly play tomorrow. Or if all of you want to get together later on today, I'm free later in the afternoon and the evening, so
mhm,
we could rearrange it. And then that way, what you're doing is you're offering another solution. You're just not saying no. You're saying no at that moment, but you're offering another solution that could be feasible. If everybody else says, "No, the only time I'm available is 9 o'clock on Monday morning," then you have to say, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm hosting a podcast on Monday mornings, but I'll be more than happy to play with you or do something with you other times, and thank you so much for asking me, and please keep me in mind for the future." So that's a way to really say no, but also give a solution to why you say no. Sometimes you don't need to. If it's something you're not interested in, no, I no, I'm not interested in doing that, or I have no interest in that. There's no harm in saying that at all. And we just have to have that confidence, and that confidence comes from our heart. It's not coming from our brain, because our brain is gonna tell us to do whatever the ego thinks is right. And if the ego thinks that you're going to be letting somebody down, they're gonna be mad at you, maybe they won't ask you again, maybe you're not gonna be in their favor, then you're gonna say yes to something you don't wanna be involved in.
mhm,
Truthfully, the other people or person, if they just want you for a specific thing, that's all they want you for.
mhm,
And, it's not that if you say no, they're never gonna ask you for something else again, or if you say yes, that they're gonna ask you for something else again. They may or may not, but right at that moment or right at that time frame is what they would like you to do, participate in, help them out with, whatever. So I'll pass it back to you.
When you mentioned about the heart and the brain and getting stuck in the intellectual, because that's where the ego is. And the boundaries have to be set and governed from the heart. And that doesn't mean that when we say heart, a lot of times people think that, oh, well, that's because you operate on emotion. No, self governance starts within ourselves internally, in our hearts and our spirits, and it integrates and it connects with our brain so that we are making decisions that are not just logical only, but that they are in alignment with what is best for us in that moment or that point in time. And how you are knowing what is best for you is you have to be tapping into the internal part. And I think sometimes that's why people stay away from doing the internal work, because it really does force us out of ego mode and into a place where we really have to begin to do deeper searching. When I work with leaders around sovereign leadership architecture and governance structures, what tends to happen is it reveals whether a person is leading from their alignment. It helps them to see, well, is my calendar being governed by someone's lack of planning that has become my emergency? Is it emotions through guilt? And you touched on that. Is it just pressure? Or are some of these things just based on I'm compromising? And so this is where the self governance comes in. This is where there has to be a structure that is built that we are operating in clarity, because clarity will allow you to say no. Clarity will allow you to set those healthy boundaries, because there are things that fall into that healthy boundaries. Boundaries are literally that evidence of our own sovereign self governance. A person without boundaries, Teresa, really becomes available to everything and aligned with nothing. And I'm going to pause there and let that sink in, because when we don't have those boundaries, we will find ourselves aligned with nothing but available for everything under the sun. And what that does is that causes leakage. And when our lives have no governed structure, no boundaries, everything becomes urgent, everyone gets access at any time, our presence now becomes non negotiable because we've said yes to everything. But you know what really becomes in chaos is our peace. So it's really important that we understand that governing our no and understanding and going in and thinking from internally, aligning that with all of this brilliance and genius that we have, because we are really, look at where the world is today from, I'm going to say, advancement. I'm not talking about where the world is, where there's chaos, but if we look at the world and where we have advanced so much, we look at technology and we look at the growth, because there are a lot of positive things. We have to take all of where we have grown to and still bring it back and have it in alignment with our self governance. And then that's going to help us determine what is going to be those boundaries, how we set those boundaries. Because we can set boundaries and they don't hurt other people. They actually sometimes help other people as well as ourselves. And then we can have boundaries that are rude. And those are two different things. And going internal is how we regulate the difference between the two, setting the healthy boundaries and not the boundaries out of rudeness, bitterness, or resentment. And I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, definitely. You have to know who you are. And you could only know that if you spend time with yourself. And
Hmm.
that's one of the scariest things for people is to
Hmm.
really sit quietly and to really listen. What is your body telling you? Are you feeling aches and pains? Do you keep getting injured in the same place, the same limb, the same area? Do you get frequent colds, perhaps? Does something do you generally ache? Do you feel a sensation in your heart? What are all these things and what is it telling you? And then there's also just listening quietly, because eventually your heart will speak to you. And it's not going to talk to you like we're having a conversation. I love that commercial about the heart, and it's about cholesterol lowering medication. But I think it's a cute commercial because it shows a heart and a person, and the heart is telling the person what to do with their lifestyle, and of course, take a medication to lower their cholesterol. But if you look at it deeper,
Hmm.
it's really saying to us that the heart has a place in what we do, and the heart has a voice.
Hmm.
So if you really look at that, not just from the perspective of, okay, it's a drug company, it's a medication, but look at it from that broader picture of it's showing that the heart has intelligence, that the heart can help us and that we should listen to our heart. So I really love that commercial. And if we don't know ourselves, we don't have boundaries. And emotional intelligence, I think a lot of times we look at that as control, but it's
Hmm.
really connection. And emotional intelligence is really connection to your inner self, to knowing who you are. It's not I know in the corporate world, it's all about reading the room, but when you do that, you're reacting to how other people want you to be. So technically, you're just saying yes. You're not setting your own boundaries. You're not being your own person. So with emotional intelligence, when you look at that, it's meant to be your connection. Your emotional intelligence is supposed to be your gauge of your inner being, of how you are acting, of the things that you are doing. Are you setting healthy boundaries? Are you not setting boundaries? Are you trying to control situations? And I think a lot of times we say yes to because we think then we control the situation. That if you say yes to everything, that you're the one in control because you're doing a positive thing, you're doing an affirmative thing, but yet you're really not in control because it throws you into chaos because you have no set boundaries. Your inner knowing, your inner self starts screaming out to you that something has to change. And sometimes the way it screams out to you is through not only your emotions like depression, anxiety, withdrawal, or hating something. Oh, I hate my job because I have so much to do, or I always have to go to these meetings, or I have to do this. Those are some of the examples of how our heart then speaks to us. That inner chaos that we get. Maybe we get ill. Maybe we're supposed to go to a meeting and we get ill. We catch a cold, we catch the flu. So then we can't go. And that's our inner knowing and our body setting a boundary for us because we don't. So to eliminate a lot of that turmoil, decide for yourself what you want to do when you are available, and you're the one that manages your own calendar. You don't technically you don't have to do anything. And I know a person who took on a full-time babysitting job.
Mm.
She retired and she decided her daughter had asked her to babysit 5 days a week out of seven, and she didn't want to say no. She didn't wanna say no, and she said, "Well, what could I do?" I said, "You could always negotiate with your daughter, but she needs my help." Well, if you weren't here, she would find a way to do it
Mhm.
without you because that's what being a grown-up is all about. That if one avenue is closed, you find another. And, she's stuck in this cycle of she wants to get out of it, but she doesn't feel she really can. I don't want my daughter mad at me. I don't want my son-in-law mad at me. I don't want this. I don't want that. My husband says that I should just say no, but how could I say no when they need me? And she's landed up internally being a little bit miserable. She smiles on the outside, but internally, you could see almost that chaos that she's never quite settled. If she does have a day off and you go out with her, it's like she's waiting for the other shoe to drop. She's waiting for something to go on, to get that phone call or at the last minute to say, "Gulp down your lunch because I need you for this." So she's always on high alert, and she never really feels great. She's told me she has back problems, she's got joint problems. Um, she chalks it up to having arthritis, like we all do, osteoarthritis. She chalks it up to, long-term back problems. But I think if she examined it further, she would see that this is her body telling her and asking her in a strong way that you need to do something and you need to change things for yourself. It's not to say she can't help her daughter out, but does she have to do it 5 days a week? Could she compromise? I think there's always a solution, but I also think a lot of times we kind of fear looking for those solutions, and it may take time on our part, and sometimes it's just easier to say, "The heck with it. I'll just suffer through it, and in 3 to 5 years, when the child's in school, then I could have a life." And by then, you don't know what's gonna go on with you. It may be too late. So I think we always have to think of ourselves as a priority and put ourselves first. Look at the airline industry.
Mhm.
Put your own oxygen mask on first and then help others. Because what's the result if you don't put on your own oxygen mask? You die. And when you die, you can't help others. So you have to be your first priority, and then only then are you free to help other people out because you're at your best. If you're in inner turmoil, you're not your best to help anybody out. And you're not doing yourself any good, and you're not doing the other people any good because you're showing up on automatic pilot. So I'm going to turn it over to you and see what you have to say, Jacqueline.
You just described that was a really great example. And someone may oversimplify and say, okay, someone that is asked to babysit. But here's what's so crucial in your story that is across all lives and all areas and environments. And I can tell you what you described is exactly what I work with and what executive C suite leaders experience and go through. Now, their challenge may not be the babysitting situation, but trust. I'm telling you, I sit, we work through these things. It is the exact same thing. It's just not, well, babysitting,
Mm,
but it's something else. And here is what makes it very challenging in the corporate world. And you hinted to this earlier because corporate has this set of rules that have been set. And you mentioned how it's a little different for women. And those rules are applied to us differently. And then we allow those rules to be applied to us differently. And that does cause us to not have the boundaries that we should, and for us to do a lot more than is in alignment with what we should be doing. And without those boundaries and without setting that the sovereignty has to be there where it's not selfish, this is about me. It's I'm operating from sovereign self-governance, and it starts with me. And asking those questions, is this aligned with my purpose? Do I have the capacity to carry what is being asked of me? If I'm being asked to complete my project and then somebody else's project and give resources from my project, now there's absolutely nothing wrong with that as long as you're not going to suffer and work three times as hard and take on the work that those were on your team were doing, but now you gave them to somebody else. So there's so many dynamics in, I'm going to say that old paradigm, because I will say that I know with the work that I'm doing and many others that we are causing that old paradigm to shift and for people to think differently and really not only ask the tough questions, but also provide the answer to the leadership that sometimes they need to hear. And really ask, am I responding from discernment or am I responding from pressure? And asking, will this strengthen the assignment that I already have, or will it weaken what I'm already aligned to? And when the answers reveal misalignment, the boundary is not us being uncooperative or uh, trying to be insensitive. Actually, the boundary is us honoring the assignment that we currently have and delivering on it without causing damage to ourselves, where we're overloaded. We sometimes not only burn out, but we become ill. And then everything falls apart. So I think your example, if we could look at how that actually applies, whether you are the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or rather you are a grandparent that is making a decision about babysitting. I think it's the mindset of how we begin to look at things and examine things deeper. And by the way, I love that commercial where the heart
Yeah.
talks too. I much like yourself, I do look at things from even just it could be regular television. I look at it from not so much as a perspective of entertainment, but really what is the messaging? And so obviously commercials have messaging.
They
And
do.
I like that because I wasn't honing in on the cholesterol medicine. And that moment, total transparency, I was asking myself, am I listening to my heart? And is it in alignment with my intellect? And do I have everything integrated? We're taught to separate things. And that's why I don't like that word balance. You hear people say work life balance. And I was never able to subscribe to it because for me, words are powerful and they mean something. And balance, how am I actually, it's not balance, but it is integrated. I can integrate things together so that they work together in a much more cohesive manner versus me trying to, well, I got to carve this out for this piece and this out for that piece. And I might be running out of room over here. All of that plays into our ability to establish really clear boundaries.
Yeah. It's all about those boundaries, and you could only everything starts from within. So you
Mhm.
can't know yourself if you can't go within.
Right.
And if you don't know what you really want, what you really desire, and how do you want those things to be in your life? Do you want to be by yourself or do you want to be with a group of people all the time?
Mhm.
Do you want to continue to work or do you want to do something differently? These are all things that come from inside of us that we make decisions about. Even a lot of times, do I want to quit work? Do I want to stay working? Do I want to do something different? A lot of times that's an inner calling.
Mhm.
And if you really look at that, inside of you, you're being asked to do something else rather than what you're doing. Now, whether you heed that call or not is up to you. And it may mean changing some things around. I think we also get caught up in we have to have a big house, we have to have a lot of cars, we have to have this, we have to have that. I don't think we have to have all that. I really don't. And I think that we could also scale back on things that we do because we have to do in order to accommodate the lifestyle that we've either gotten used to, we either want, or we put ourselves in, and now we feel like there's no way out. But there always is a way out. It may take some planning, it may take somebody else, another professional helping you out. But where there's a will, there's always a way. And I think if we have that will that we want to know ourselves, that we want to be who we were meant to be, that we will do the inner work. Like you said, it's not easy. It's very, very difficult because you have to face things about yourself and you have to really look at yourself and say, is this who I am? Is this who I want to be? Maybe I want to be a little bit different in this aspect. Maybe I want to be a little bit less of this. But we are the co-creators of our own life. How we create our life isn't totally up to us because there's always that higher power.
Mhm.
You could call it karma, you could call it God, you could call it whatever you want, but there's an outside force. But at the same time, as human beings, we could decide what we want to do and how we want to do it. We are the architect of our own lives, and we just need to go with that. We need to go with that we could be who we want to be. And it may not be easy, it may take some work. Do you have any last words to say?
I will close with this. Boundaries are not about becoming hard and being a hard, mean person. Boundaries are about becoming governed. They are not about rejecting people. You're not rejecting someone, but boundaries are about refusing to abandon your peace and your capacity and your assignment in life and all that is aligned for your purpose. Saying no is not merely a communication skill that we have to become an expert at, but it is a leadership discipline, a spiritual discipline, and an emotional regulation. And it's, again, all about governing you so that you're actually doing the things that you know are in alignment with your heart and your intellect.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And what I'll leave our audience with uh, to practice saying no and see how you feel about it and come up with other alternatives and solutions. No, I can't, but no, this won't work. Perhaps we can do this and set up those scenarios
Mhm.
and see how you feel about them. And every day, sit down, even if it's for 2 minutes, close your eyes, be comfortable,
Mhm.
and just be quiet and listen. What is your body? What is your heart telling you? Thank you, everyone who is listening to the broadcast and those that will be listening to the replay. As always, we appreciate you and thank you. So as we leave this, I'm going to say it one more time. No, I can't do this now, but I can offer you blank. Thank you so much for joining us.
I have